Lessons Learned, a show where we talk about the good, the bad, and the lessons in between. I'm your host, Captain Alyssa Hinckley, and this is Lessons Learned. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Lessons Learned. Joining us in the studio today to share some of the lessons he's learned is Colonel Robert Rickgauer. Welcome to the show, sir. Glad to have you on.
Hey, I'm glad to be here. Just thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, I know it was, for our listeners out there, it was a little bit of pulling teeth to get Colonel Rickgauer to come on the show. So I'm really glad you're here. I'm glad you bit the bullet and decided to come on the show because I think you've got a lot of great things to say. So thank you so much. And then, as our listeners know, I like to give a little bit of context so that you can have an idea who our guest is and where they came from and what they're doing. So Colonel Rickgauer commissioned onto active duty as an ordnance officer in 2004 following his graduation from Central Washington University. While on active duty, he deployed twice in support of Iraqi freedom, once in 2005 and again in 2007. In 2009, he joined the Wyoming Army National Guard as the Troop Command Battalion S4 and has since held a number of positions and commands within the Wyoming Army National Guard, most notably as the Deputy Chief of Staff of Logistics and the 960th Support Battalion Commander, and he currently serves as the Deputy Chief of Staff of Operations. He received a Bachelor's of Science in Industrial Technology Engineering from Central Washington University and a Master's in Strategic Leadership from the University of Charleston. And prior to starting the show, he told me his biggest accomplishment above all else is that he is happily married to his wife, Sarah, and together they have 3 children. Of course, you all know that that is just a very teeny tiny fraction of our guest as a leader. So let's just jump right into it. And Colonel Rickgauer, why don't we dial it back to old Cadet Rickgauer back in 2000, well, I guess prior to 2004. Tell me about that time and tell me about what kind of got you started and why you were interested in joining.
Well, it's kind of funny. I grew up in a military family. Most notably, my dad was in the Navy, and I was young, impressionable. I'd like to think I was considered a relatively good kid. I did what I was told. I listened to my dad, and nonetheless, there I was about sophomore year in high school. He threw down a stack of papers, pretty big stacks, like a ream of paper, and said, "You're going to fill these out." Son, I'm like, what is this? And he's like, these are called ROTC applications. This is how you're going to pay for college. And I said, okay. More notably,
Roger that.
Yeah, and I did what I was told. And more notably, I felt like I was kind of brainwashed as a kid. I didn't really know that like college was an option.
Yeah, okay.
Or I had to go, and I was just figuring out how I was going to pay for it. I didn't really know that there was an option for me not to go. And my dad was enlisted. I'm the first officer of our generations of military family, and. Yeah, and so it was kind of a big deal. And he said, if you're going to go military, you need to go officer. Yeah.
So was he pushing you towards a different service? I know when I was looking at joining, my dad, of course, being Navy, he was like, why in the world would you want to join the Army? So I don't know if you had that kind of experience, maybe some funny, like he was like, okay, I want you to join the military, but whoa, the Army, no way.
No, actually, he was not biased towards any one branch. To be honest with you, I naturally gravitated towards Marines. So
oh, wow,
I
interesting.
actually wanted to be a Marine, but in the end, through the application process, the Army was one to show me the money. Simultaneously, it was still at the same school of which I won a scholarship to play baseball for him. So.
Okay, great. Yeah, it was kind of the same thing for me. I was like, they're offering a lot more scholarships, Dad. And he was like, okay, I'm sold. Yeah. So,
no, I tried all branches.
The
Navy and Air Force didn't really even sniff at me. The Army was offering me money, so it's like that's where we're going. So.
Well, that's interesting because you have a degree in engineering, but the Army took you. So I'm really confused on like what your intellectual capacity actually is. No, I'm just joking.
I'll end it with this. C's get degrees around here from Rickgauer. So
I'm just joking. For anybody out there who is offended by my bashing the Army, it's all in good fun. So, okay, so tell me a little bit about, we did a little snippet of your career, but let's tell me about kind of different positions you've had and different things that you've learned over the course of your career, and kind of let's talk about the early challenges you faced.
I think some of those early challenges, first and foremost, especially going through ROTC at a Division II school with one of the top 10 ROTC commands in the nation. It was very competitive. To be honest with you, they use some of the basic metrics that we use today, still continued, like height, weight scores, PT scores. What do your grades look like? And at that time, by the time I was senior, I was looking at like a 330 PT score, and I was considered mediocre. And I was running like a 3.3 GPA. And so when you're looking at that, it was pretty competitive. Also, it was very competitive when you had, at that time, National Guardsmen were part of our ROTC program there, and they knew much more than I did. They had more experience because I was coming in straight out of high school.
Right.
And didn't know much about it. But from there, there was a large gap between there. But once I commissioned, and then immediately after commissioning, I had some other really fun schools I went to OBC, ended up going to Ranger School, and then had airborne school in there. And then it was less than 12 months after finishing OBC, we were deployed. So that gap narrowed very quickly, especially when you're thrown into the mix, and you adapt, overcome, and learn, and that's what I feel that I did. To be honest with you, to this day, and you've probably heard it in some of my change commands or even in some of my promotions, is I was raised by NCOs. So, and with that, and that was taught by my father. He was enlisted, and they have experience, and they have something else that takes you along. And I was very thankful and appreciative that I had some very good NCOs to mentor me and bring me up through the ranks, especially at a young, impressionable age as being a young lieutenant.
Right.
And I was raised by them. And that's how you ended up with the Rickgauer you got today. You're in the Wyoming Guard, but that's my start.
I know. I remember, back in those. For me, it was so long ago that I was a cadet, years and years.
Yeah, I'm sure.
So those memories really escape me. I can't remember. Once again, just kidding. But I remember growing up, in the ROTC program, and they always told us, "Oh, you need to lean on your NCOs." But I didn't really, you just hear that and you're like, okay. Sure. But then once you become a second lieutenant, that relationship is so crucial. And so let's talk about the officer-enlisted relationship, especially the younger one, because I remember being so terrified. This is a little shout-out to Sergeant Major Spalding. He was the first Sergeant Major that I ever saw in my whole life, and he absolutely terrified me. And since him and I are great friends, and, we talk all the time, but I remember being really afraid to interact with senior NCOs. So I don't know, that might not be an experience for everybody, but talk about if you have any experience of being a second lieutenant, kind of nervous, unstable about your job, and then how you navigate that relationship.
Oh, absolutely. I got a couple quick stories for you.
Yeah.
Very fun. When I first reported to Fort Carson, there were 3rd Brigade, 4th Infantry Division out of the 64th BSB. They assigned me to a maintenance platoon. I had 66 soldiers in that platoon. And I had a Sergeant First Class, Kurt Crochelle is his name, still one of my best friends today, but and he was my best man at my wedding. But I digress. But so he is very intimidating. And even as a young lieutenant, just finished up OBC. I had an opportunity to do the Ranger School thing and then reported there. I was intimidated, And one of our first interactions together, he literally took me by the collar and was like, "I run this platoon. Do you understand? And you're going to listen to everything I say."
Right.
And I was kind of like, "Are you supposed to talk to me like that?" And shut up. And and that's kind of our relationship started. But I tell you, it was within the first 3 days of reporting, we ended up going down to Red Devil there at Fort Carson. We had a 2-week field training exercise, and there's no better opportunity to learn your NCO than head right to the FTX. And,
right.
And it was there that I think our relationship initially blossomed. And I think because I was just a young, impressionable lieutenant. I was following a training schedule, said we're doing PMCS. I had an assigned Humvee. I pulled out the PMCS with, the Dash 10 with my driver, and we started PMCSing early in the morning. And he's like, "What are you doing?" I said, "I'm PMCS in my truck like it says we're supposed to." And he's like, I think we're going to be okay.
Yeah.
So it kind of worked out well there. But and then as far as being intimidated by sergeant majors, I always joke about this, but that was part of my Ranger school time, of which, by the way, in full disclosure, I did not graduate. So that's why I don't wear a Ranger tab today. But airborne, and then also at Fort Carson, you kind of walked around. I'd walk around, scared about sergeant majors jumping out of bushes, yelling at me for walking on the grass.
Right. Oh yeah.
That
I
literally
know.
happens.
Yeah, they're really intimidating out there. But one thing that I've always been, it took me a long time to get there, but as you've progressed in your career, how did you navigate? Because ultimately you are the one that's responsible. So although the platoon sergeant can come in and say, hey, I run this platoon, how do you navigate that of like, yes, I allow you to run the platoon, but then at some time, my name is still the one that's written on this. And, if something goes wrong, like how do you, not saying like sit down and counsel them, but how do you actually approach that? How do you communicate that? And how do you navigate that relationship and that balance between being the leader but understanding you're the most junior guy?
Yeah, I tell you, still today, any relationship with anyone, I think it's built around trust. Mm-hmm. And you build that trust by you give it, right?
Right.
Like with anybody that you meet, you start with that trust and you start with the baseline, and you end up earning that between each other. Mm-hmm. And at a certain point, that continues to blossom. And I tell you as far as like I tell you that story, it was quickly after that I think being a good leader, as Sergeant Kershaw was, he understood. He saw where I was. He saw that I was learning, that I was trying, that I cared. Mm-hmm. And about anything as is anything in this life, if you care about it, it'll show and it'll come out. And so he took me under the wing and he raised me, and at some point those roles did flip.
Right.
I was running a platoon and he was there and he fell in line and it's just part of that trust, and it's part of respect. And it's not respect for just the rank, but it's a respect for the person. Mm-hmm. We're responsible for soldiers' lives, and we were going to Iraq.
Right.
And 8 months after graduating, I was in Iraq, responsible for soldiers' lives. And we had to have trust, and we had to have respect for each other. Otherwise, it just wasn't going to work,
right.
And it had to happen. And so he gave me the opportunity, I gave him the opportunity, and that was the foundation of how that platoon was run. So it's pretty neat.
So how did you take that mentorship and kind of use that throughout your career? And then also, let's just talk about mentorship in general, because I feel like that's a buzzword around the organization, or maybe even just in general. It's always go find a mentor. But there's no Army regulation that dictates. Is there an Army regulation? No. I have no idea. There might actually be one. But there isn't anything that clearly defines what a formal mentorship relationship looks like. Or how do you get mentorship? If you're not getting it, how do you ask for it? So let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, no, that's great. That's a great topic I'd love to talk about. About the closest thing that I'm aware of, which I think is absolutely fantastic, is the ADRP 6-22. It talks about Army leadership. Within there, you'll find a few blurbs about mentorship and what that means. But to be honest with you, and this is Rickgauerism, is the individual and the person has to they want it. They got to have the initiative and the drive. They want to be good at something. They want to be better. And the mentorship is sought out. It really is. Mentorship is not a top-down driven. It's a bottom-up fed.
Right.
And what that means is you've got to ask for it. You got to find that. And that was one of the things I learned very quickly was not necessarily work in a room, but being able to come into a room of any leader, of any branch, of any rank. Rank does not matter. And kind of pick out those good leaders. And then you watch them, pay attention to them, and then you start to talk to them, and then you just seek that advice, in all aspects. I think every single person, no matter what capacity or wherever they're at, they have something to offer, and it's a matter of finding it. So,
yeah, I think asking for mentorship is probably one of the hardest things that I have experienced, because it's really, reaching up is really difficult and it's really intimidating.
No, that's one of the things. I think I just like yourself, we continue to grow that. My mentorship started right with that platoon sergeant, and I'd ask him, how can we do better? What can I do? How can I help? Those type of things. I have a question. What does this mean? Those type of things. And I started gaining that. And then it was the personal relationships that you make with people. Mm-hmm. And remember, for me, it doesn't matter the rank. It matters on what I see in that person, how they carry themselves, how they talk, what I admire about that person. And so you kind of continue that role. And then it went on to my company commander at the time, Captain Staley, and I developed that relationship with him, and I was seeking his advice, and I saw that he had something of value to me. And you just continue to grow that. No, I didn't. As a lieutenant, I'd walk up to the brigade commander and say, "Hey, can I ask you a question?"
Right.
I was never that bold, quite intimidated, actually. And that's just where you start. Mm-hmm. I just hope that, even as an 06 today, I hope I'm the leader that people see, that they see walking down the hall or as part of meetings or even hear this podcast that want to reach out to me, because I put my pants on the same way everybody else does. I know I wear 06, but at that point, sometimes there's probably soldiers out there today, even Wyoming Guard, tell you, "Wow, you're like the highest paid lieutenant or NCO that you know." I kind of question it. I kind of wonder if I would have been a better NCO than I am an officer, but I don't think that matters when it comes down to it. I'm a leader, and I'm proud of it. So
right. Well, that begs a very important question. Do you put your socks on before you put your pants on, or do you not? Because maybe you don't put your pants on the same way everybody. If you put your socks on after you put your pants on, you're a psychopath.
Yeah, no. Socks go first.
Okay, good. I'm glad we cleared that up, because I feel like you wouldn't make it this far if that's how you put your pants on.
I guess I could there was probably better analogies, right?
I'm just joking.
But I'm like everyone else. I have kids. I have the same challenges. What the wife and I are making for dinner. This is so hard,
Of course,
all of those things, I joke all the time with my wife, and I'm like, deployment's no problem. Company command, no problem. Battalion command, no problem. Give me a 4 and 7 year old. Like, this is a problem.
Yeah, that is where I draw the line.
I love my kids, but anyway, it's just
so
fun.
that's interesting. That's a great segue into work-life balance. So you were active duty, and then you've always worked full-time for the Guard. So it's a little bit different than kind of what our M-Day force experience is, but there's still a lot that you have to manage. And it seems like you were a student athlete, you were an ROTC, and you were an engineering student. So it almost feels like since you were 17, you have been overcommitted and spread pretty thin. So let's talk about work-life balance. How do you do that? What are some things that you do to maintain that?
Yeah. Well, just like it says work-life balance in there, I think, and throughout life, there's high op-tempo times and there's lower op-tempo times, and you're trying to draw the line in the middle and keep that balance. And it wasn't so easy earlier on in the career, and managing that stress, and especially with deployment and being so young, 22 years old, and you're in Iraq, and all the way from, and when I say responsible for soldiers' lives, literally running convoy logistic patrols in Iraq like every day, 24/7.
Right.
Recovery operations officer for the entire AO, recovering burnt down, blown up vehicles, and you name it. It's stressful. And I think at a certain point, you end up learning how to manage that with like levels of stress, I should say. Almost, I'd like to put out the analogy of like working out. Like, if you want to get good at push-ups, you got to do push-ups. If you ever want to max the push-ups on the APFT, we're in an ACFT now, but on an APFT, and the max is 80 push-ups, you'll never get to 80 push-ups if you never practice to get to 80 push-ups. And so with the experience in the Army, both active duty and the Guard, they've pushed me my limits. And with that, I've continued to raise the bar on, I think, how much I can handle and my capacity for stress. I'd like to say that. And then the ability to manage that. And I think that's important. So coupled that with, to be honest with you, I'm a person, I don't take the work home. I don't take the work home. For some reason, I've naturally been able to carry that with me, and it's been helpful to me. I don't know why. I can't tell you or give any tips to any soldiers or anybody how not to bring it home. My wife's quite opposite, right? She likes to talk about work at home a lot, and I'm quite opposite. She doesn't really know what's going on at my work, and It's just because when I come home, I'm focused on my family. That's my zen, and I was good at that, and I continue to be good at that today. I'm willing to take a phone call anytime, any place, anywhere, but at the same time, I'm not consistently thinking about it when I go home at night or on weekends. I do those things that are important to me and my family, and I focus on that, and that's how I've been able to keep that balance. I think that's important. And
Right.
You talk about the work-life balance, and I think that's important there for the work-life balance, especially in and out of uniform. But what I will tell you, and I think a shout-out to Wyoming Guardsmen of all ranks, is I've had a lot of good people working with me, for me, and I've worked for a lot of good people. And so with that, the workload is shared.
Yeah.
It's shared amongst a group of people, small teams. And I can't tell you how imperative and how important that is. And that's through that leadership, that mentorship, and that balance throughout the Wyoming Guard. So I think that's important. And when I say that also happens at home.
Right.
Yeah. So when I say that happens at home, my wife shares that with me, and I share that with her. Like,
Right.
I may not talk a lot about it, but I have in the past, and she's there for me. And we do that for each other. So that work-life balance, life's a challenge, and it can be.
Right.
And you got to be able to balance that and carry that through. And there's people in life to help you do that. My wife's the one that does that for me at home, and fellow soldiers and uniform and out of uniform personnel I work with every day help me with that here. And I hope I've returned that favor to them. So
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I was just having this conversation with one of my peers the other day about how, there's work-life balance is kind of an interesting topic because we think that we have to maintain work-life balance 24/7, right? You always have to have that. But I feel like there are times sometimes there's a time when you need to stay late, and then there's a time when you need to go home early. So I don't know if you have any more to say about that, but
I guess the other part of the work-life balance, as I said, I would think is self-reflection. Like, know yourself, know
Right.
how you're feeling, what you're thinking. You got things like you talk about. Like I talk about stinking thinking kind of deal. You kind of get negative and you're thinking about those things. And I've picked up on it. I've done it. And certain times, like, wow, I need to clear my head. We need to get better. Or maybe it's the op tempo or whatever's going on at the time or things that bother you. But it is that balance. And I really think it's about having people in your life that helps you with that work-life balance. And I think that's important. But you're right. There's opportunities when you're in command. It's at a little bit higher op tempo than it is, say, if I was Deputy G4, right?
Right.
And take those with a grain of salt. There's and no, I just think it is a tough balance. And I wouldn't lie if I wouldn't say that there wasn't some really stressful times in my career,
Right.
both in the Wyoming Guard and the active duty. But I think it's those times that you've made it through that. I've persevered that's made me better, made me in the later I am today. So
right. So let's talk about a challenge, or if you have a specific example of something that you faced that was super stressful or, kind of a very difficult time period, and then how you overcame that, or maybe what kind of lessons you took from that.
Yeah, wow. I tell you, as you asked me that question, I think I have a slew of them that just kind of run through my head, and I tell you, I think one of the ones there's all kinds of challenges throughout my career that helped me make decisions where I am today and those type of things. But one of them I didn't really have much of a choice on, and it was selected for me. And I think the leaders close to me already know a lot about this, but and it was a challenge for me. But it was when I was selected to be the TAGS executive officer here in the Wyoming Guard. I tell you what, I've always known this, even from active duty. When I was a young company grade, and I'm watching other captains and lieutenants being pulled up to be general aides on active duty. And typically on active duty, what they do is they have a list of them that they want to interview, and then you're supposed to show up to this interview. I was going to be that guy that didn't show up to the interview.
Oh, boy.
I never I never yearned and never wanted to do that job. If there was a list of jobs I did not want to do, that was one of them. I found my niche early on, and that was at my platoon time during Iraq. And as being a platoon leader, I want to be a soldier. I want to be with soldiers. And that's where my strength is, and that's what I love to do. And I didn't necessarily want to do that. Perhaps other leaders disagree, and they say, hey, there's good value in being a TAGS aide. But still to this day, I still don't think it was for me. But I challenged with the fact that Wyoming Guard at the time, Major General Reiner, had he had selected me by name to come down and be his exec, and I struggle with that from the moment I got the letter. I continue to struggle with that. So, and with that being said, so you can imagine the struggle that I had psychologically, mentally, with just accepting the job and going down there. And to be honest with you, it was a huge challenge. And it didn't have anything to do with Major General Reiner. As I said, I think what it had to do with was just doing the job. Like I'm a leader of soldiers. I belong down there, that type of attitude. And I still think that today, but I know my place. And I've learned that, and that was part of my leadership maturity. But what I will tell you is, at a certain point in that job, I was about 12 months into that job, I was starting to look for a new one. There's two, I would say there was one conversation, one person that saved me and why I'm still uniformed today in the Wyoming Guard, and that was my wife. This is quite a funny story. I started looking for new jobs. I was talking much about the job. It was a high stress for me because it was something I didn't want to do, kind of like throwing a cat in the water, or maybe a young child that doesn't want to eat their dinner. That's how I kind of, if I can paint that picture for you, that's a young Major Rickgauer that was TAGS 8, like, I don't want to do this, you know, type of deal. And so I started looking for new jobs, and finally my wife had listened to it for a year, and she said, we were having a conversation, and she's like, you know what, Robert, I'm tired of listening to this. If you want to look for a new job, I support you. But I'll tell you this, you haven't given this job a chance. And I'm like, I want to I'm going to take my toys and play in that room. Like, you know, like, how dare you? And, you know, and simultaneously, that was coupled with, coincidentally, it was my first counseling or first, you know, discussion that I can remember between, at the time, Brigadier General Porter and Major General Reiner, where General Porter had pulled me in and said, let's have a counseling, let's talk. And I'd been there almost 12 months before this happened. And my wife's conversation happened with me there, and then he pulled me in, and it was kind of a funny conversation. You know, he pulled me in and was like, okay, let's do this. And I'm quite open and honest. Yeah, I say what I mean, and I mean what I say. And he's like, I remember General Porter, he kind of struggled with it, and it was kind of an uncomfortable place for him. And I just sat there in front of a major and form, and he said, well, Robert, I don't even know how to put this. And I said, sir, just say it. And he goes, well, you're just not living up to the expectation. And it was like, and I sat there quiet because I didn't know what kind of counseling this is. I've had the one-on-ones, and you know, is this a direct or not? And he said, so what do you think about what I just said? And I said, you're right. I'm not.
Right.
And he was taken back like, oh, you know? And I was like, yes.
Yes. I'm fully aware of my capability, and this is not it.
This is not it. And and from there, you could see the conversation blossom as you know, Leader General Porter is, and he's like, no, is this an open conversation? This is one way? And he's like, no, let's talk about this. So we were able to get through that, and I finished out another 12, 14 months with him, and General Runner finished that out, and we were able to drive through and get through that job. It seems that all the other TAG execs, either before me or after me, have a great time, and they love the job.
But somehow, no, I'm just.
But somehow, yeah. So no, and I struggled with it. That was a challenge. I was, I can take orders pretty well, but I can't tell you how bad or how much I struggled with that. And I was asked to deploy twice. Do 15-month tours. I can do that. I was told I was extended 90 days in country. Like, I can handle that. But here's a young Rickgauer, like, you're going to be a TAGS aide. And I'm like, I can't handle this.
Yeah.
So, but it is what it is. It's those things in life that make us better, right? So
what did you take from that position specifically and use it, maybe apply it to you as a battalion commander? That's kind of, it's not quite at the strategic level, right? But being the tag exec, you kind of get to dip your toe in the strategic level, and then going back down to maybe the operational level. How did you use that experience to then be a better battalion commander?
Oh, absolutely. I tell you, a lot of good things and bad things can be taken away from that at any position really, and at that level. But here's what I tell you: just by me learning and adapting and overcoming that challenge for me, I learned even more so how to continue to talk with soldiers at all levels, and how to get them through that and help them personally, but really professionally as being not too much longer after that, I ended up following on to a battalion command. To answer your question, I look back, and that position, and General Ryder and General Porter were right. They gave me the opportunity to learn, and I did learn back. And to this day, I've thanked them both for that opportunity. But what I learned from that job was it was more so about my personal leadership and how I wanted to lead and how I influence change at that level.
Right.
Whether you're a tag and you're influencing an entire enterprise like the Wyoming Military Department, or whether I'm a battalion commander and I had only 100 soldiers under me as I did at the BSB. But, what kind of leader do I want my soldiers to emulate? And then how do I influence change there? And I think that was that was some of the tidbits that I took away from that job, and how you utilize that to influence that. Not to mention having the opportunity, because I'd only been in the field until I came up here to the Joint Force headquarters at that time, was utilizing staff, seeing all the assets that are available to us in the military department before I went back there to command, especially at a battalion level, was imperative. Like, I was very naive, even at that time, very naive. Like, I didn't realize everything that was available to us and our soldiers. And, I knew so little just being in the brigade and being out there.
Right.
And I think that was eye-opening for me, and hopefully I capitalized on all of the things that we had available to us for our soldiers during my tenure up there with the BSB. So, yeah, pretty neat.
Yeah. So you talk about challenges, but then what about maybe something that you perceived as a failure? And how did you navigate the failure side of things, and not just, oh, this is a challenge and I can persevere, but what you thought was a failure? Do you have kind of an example about that?
Yeah. Trying to think about that. And actually, as you asked me the question, to be honest with you, I kind of struggle with that. It's not that Rickgauer doesn't fail. No. I fail every day. Trust me. Fail in communication, fail in assignments. I fail to reply to an email.
Oh, don't we all though?
Yeah.
Jeez Louise.
No, I don't. I think that's a big part of all this tied together, what we were talking about, the work-life balance and leadership and mentorship and all those different things. I mean, I don't necessarily, you can call it failure, and I'm fine with calling things failure, but I think I'd rather call it opportunities to learn, right? You as a person and as a leader, you're built from your experiences, right? So to me, I think I've been deployed in combat a couple times, right? Those are near and dear to my heart, and I always remember those. I'd call a failure had like maybe one of my soldiers had died or something. That's a failure, right? Everything else can be overcome, because I can't bring somebody back.
Right.
But everything else can be overcome. Mistakes, those type of things, whatever have you. And so I didn't really ever see all those things as failures, I would look at, and I keep calling it challenges. It's funny that you picked up on that.
Yeah.
And I call them challenges. I mentioned early on in the conversation, and I kind of mentioned that because it sticks in me in my career.
Yeah.
I'm not wearing a Ranger tab. I wanted a Ranger tab more than anything in my career, and I had the opportunity there, and it just didn't work out for me. And I knew when I left at that point that the opportunity to ever go back was probably slim. And and how did I overcome that or whatever? I tell you, it was a great opportunity to learn. And I learned more about myself during that time, those several months that I was there between all those phases, and where prepared me to be in charge, to be with that NCO and to run that platoon in Iraq. It was a blessing in disguise. And although I don't wear the tab, It doesn't matter. I look at that and I learn from that. Now, is that something in my career I would have liked to been able to wear that and have that part of me? Yeah, absolutely. But it is part of me and always will be. And so you kind of look at that. And that's where I say it's not necessarily failures. It's just an opportunity to learn, and mistakes happen. And everybody, that's for everybody out there at all levels. Every day it happens. And and as long as we recognize that and we don't over exaggerate, the results of those things, and as long as we learn from them, that's the only thing that I ask of everything of my soldiers and of myself. If we learn from that and we can make us better, then I think that's what's important there.
Great, yeah. So you talk about learning lessons and learning things over your career. What do you do personally to kind of self-development, or do you read? Do you listen to podcasts? Do you watch TV?
Yeah, and so
anything that not to put you on the spot and be like, hey, what TV shows are you watching right now? But is there anything that you do that's kind of that less of entertainment and more for self-development, or you kind of keep that type of stuff for entertainment and you say, hey, when I read, I like to read fiction books because
I read picture books. Yeah, I really do. Like I look at you look at my rap sheet and I got all this education and I'm like, how did I do that?
I cannot read.
I cannot. C's get degrees, man.
Yeah.
So here's the deal. For me, it's OJT, on the job training. I am telling you, every day I have learned to be better. Today, I am more confident in G3 than I was just 11 months ago when I started the job.
Right.
I was kind of flailing a little bit. I would be honest with you. I'm sure my soldiers, my folks were working with me like, who's this guy?
Come on,
let's
go.
Let's go. But
push him down the road
every day was an opportunity for me, and that's where I learn. I don't learn. That's just me personally. I don't learn from books. I didn't, ILE, AOC, two of the worst PMEs in my military career. Absolutely horrible. I didn't learn a thing from them. I hated it. I learned from OJT on the job. I learn every day, and the stuff that my leaders challenge me with and what I challenge myself with, and just learning and as I go. And that I pick up regs, and the 7.0 is on my desk.
Right.
And it's been thumbed through quite a few times, but that's how I learn. I'm on the job and I'm learning. But and that's what I do. And I think it's and I told you earlier, I care. I care about the people. I care about how well we do collectively. I care about how my own performance is, and just that care enough makes me want to learn. It makes me want to be better. I think, and that's how I learn. So that's what you get today. So
yeah. So interesting. Kind of a question that sparked what you just said is soldier care. So that's another one, going back to the buzzwords around here, is soldier care. But I think it's incredibly important, right? And we talk about it all the time. So you, having come from all levels of leadership up to the G3, what does soldier care look like to you, as a commander, as a platoon leader? You don't have to go into examples of both of those, but what does soldier care look like?
Oh, wow. Yeah, and I tell you, I've continued to shape that throughout my career. More so, I think the most shaping I've had of that, the buzzword of soldier care, was during my command time, battalion command time. I tell you, I think soldier care incorporates all of that. It's almost like I'd like to put out like caring for your own children, right? Mm-hmm. You discipline them because you care about them. You know what I mean? You take care of them because you care about them. All of those things that come with like raising your own children is. I'd like to apply to taking care of your soldiers, and I treated it very much the same thing. No, I didn't spank my soldiers.
Yeah, that's fair.
No, but
you probably didn't write an evaluation for your children.
No,
so
but
there are some different things.
Soldiers want that, You've heard different leaders talk about different aspects of that, even General Alcar himself and our Chief of Staff, Colonel Lewis, and those things. Soldiers want to be challenged at drill. They want training. They want to be challenged. They want to be busy.
Right.
But at the same time, they yearn for discipline. They yearn for structure. We all do. I think it's a human trait. Like I really do think that. kids, soldiers, even myself, we yearn for that. And I think that's important, giving that to them. You're talking to soldiers and like, I just want to do stuff. I want to have experiences. I don't really want to be, sitting around or just doing online training and stuff. I joined the Army so I could do stuff that I'd normally experience had I not been wearing this uniform. And I picked up on that early, and I think that was part of being that. The other thing is too about soldier care is, I don't know how to put it, like treating soldiers or people, equitably. I would say that treating soldiers as adults.
Right.
I had a command philosophy that was two parts, right? Personal accountability and common sense. And with that, I led that same way. My soldiers, both full-time and M-Day, they had a freedom to be adults. They had freedom to make choices. You empowered them, that they feel comfortable making choices. Even if at the end of the day, if it was a failure or the wrong one, it didn't matter. It was more important to me that they felt that those NCOs, E5s, E6s, E7s, young lieutenants, that they had the power and the authority, not necessarily power, but they were empowered to make those decisions without running it through me. I wanted them to feel that, and I worked so hard to make sure that was happening, because that's how they're going to learn. That's how and that was given to me, right? You had one brigade commander of 3,600 troops deployed to Iraq. That 06 couldn't be there to make that decision.
Right.
I had to make that decision. That 05, 06, that sergeant major, that first sergeant, they weren't out on the convoys, making decisions on the spot, out there on the streets. I was as a lieutenant, and that E6 that was given to me to run that. And those are the best lessons learned in life. And I tell you, and in our environment here with the Guard and on drill weekends, there's nothing safer.
Right.
And there's no decision that they can make, really, unless it was life, health, or safety, that would be wrong.
Right.
I want them to feel comfortable making that. And I think that was important and part of my leadership philosophy and what I continue to live by today. And I want everyone to feel that, whether you're a Title V technician or whether you're a soldier. And now in the position I am, a lot of them are working for me. I want them to feel that way. And I want them to have that freedom or feel comfortable, one, making a decision for their own career and their own job, but also for their own personal sake. Like we talked about work-life balance. Like, you know what? I'm feeling a little tired today or whatever. I need to break away today. I need to go get in a lift session or go grab some caffeine, or I want them to have freedom in their work and their hours that they're working, because I tell you, somebody who is mentally and physically fit and prepared and feel confident and things are good, going good at home, it's undoubtedly will get so much better quality and more work out of them that's in favor of the Wyoming Army National Guard and their soldiers.
Right.
And that's just so important to me. So I hope I do asthma checks. I check on that stuff, and I hope those that listen to this, that, and even the ones that work for me, believe it. So that's all I can do.
Right. Yeah, I think we oftentimes, when we say soldier care, it's like, hey, I care about you. How are you doing? How's the family? But, for me, I've had this conversation with one of my mentors about soldier care and what it truly means. And, as a leader, what she told me was, you're there to keep them accountable, because soldiers like accountability.
Yes,
like you said, they like to be held accountable. They like to have the structure. And that really sunk in with me, because, I just like to be friends with everybody. So it's really hard for me to have those tough conversations to say, hey, Major Rickgauer, you're not living up to your expectations. But those conversations that I've had where a leader told me that, I've really appreciated. And it's like, oh, yeah, that is an asthma check. I am not living up to the expectations. I'm not just the type of person who likes to come in and just, sit around. And soldiers aren't that way either. They they're eager to do their job. They're eager to be held accountable. So, it's just an interesting point of soldier care is holding them accountable, doing those evaluations, doing those, doing the counselings, doing that type of stuff to hold them to a standard. And,
It's leadership. Soldier care is leadership.
Right.
I'm telling you. Like, it's a buzzword, soldier care, but at the end of the day, it is leadership.
Right.
Soldiers want to be led. People want to be led. I want to be led.
Right.
And I tell you, just so many things going through my mind right now, but leadership is key. And we talk about the accountability piece, but I'm telling you, being empowered is one of them. I'm telling you.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
When you talk about soldier care, soldiers want to be empowered, but they want honest feedback. That there's so many things going through my mind right now, but it is. And
it kind of is also to that point of knowing your soldiers and knowing when they need to take a knee and when, it's like, hey, what is going on? That, so it's like you almost as a leader, because oftentimes I've found that some of my subordinates that I've led, they don't want to ask for help. They don't want to ask for, man, this is the 4th drill in a row that my kid's been sick and I just can't, and it's like you as a leader, it's like, how do you help them manage their work-life balance, and how do you help them understanding their family and their situation and everything to kind of help them navigate that, while also holding them accountable? Because, right, we have a mission, we have to get something done, but we also have to manage that. So,
well, we've been hitting soldier care pretty hard here, but real quick, the other thing is it's those personal relationships.
Yes, right.
I'm telling you, personal relationships are huge, and that means something to every single person. Mm-hmm. But for me, it was about knowing the soldier, not necessarily knowing, the M-Day E4's kids' names or their spouses' names. No, that wasn't my deal. Mm-hmm. My deal was knowing that soldier, and being with them and sharing in their hardships. And you talk about the NCO officer relationship, and I think it's just relationships in general. Is I find myself, I'm that leader. I want to be that leader that shares in those hardships of the soldiers, right? Like it goes along that lines of you'd never ask anybody to do something you're not willing to do yourself. Mm-hmm. And that's something my father taught me, that NCO Sergeant Crucial taught me, and I continue to live to that to today. And I asked my soldiers, the BSB command, we were doing 2-a-day PTs. We had under a 50% passing rate when I took over command. And I said, we're going to do PT twice a day. And they're like, are you kidding me? On a MUTA 5, you're talking, 2, 4, 5 PT sessions in a MUTA 5. What else are we doing? And it was challenging, but here's the deal. I was at every single one of them, and I was getting my sweat on, and I'm working hard, just as hard, if not harder than the soldiers that were next to me. Mm-hmm. And they needed to see that. And that's part of that soldier care. It's all of it. It's not necessarily about the benefits.
Right.
It's about the leadership. And it goes back to leadership. But I knew all of the soldiers. Like, I made a point to know all of them. Mm-hmm. And I think it's that my way, and we got to figure out your way and everyone else's individual way, what soldier care means to you and how you can show that. And that was my way of doing it.
Right.
Retention interviews, similar to that. I never had a soldier report to my office at a certain time to find out, are they going to re-enlist or why they're not re-enlisting. It wasn't doing that. Actually, I'd probably find that soldier at PT and I'm holding his or her feet during sit-ups. And
right.
Hey, have you thought about re-enlisting? Like, why wouldn't you not like this, And
they're like, sir, please don't talk to me. I'm trying to do sit-ups.
Yeah.
And you're like, hey,
no,
trying to have a conversation. And they're huffing and puffing. I would be like, sir, please.
Yeah, some did, but here's the deal. It was impressionable.
Right.
I left a mark
absolutely.
on them.
Yeah.
And they felt comfortable coming out. Soldiers out behind the armory, they're on the break, they're having a smoke break. No, I don't smoke. No, I can't stand smoke. But I'd go out there with them. Mm-hmm. Hey, what are you guys doing? So what's on your mind? How's drill going? Those type of things. That's all part of the soldier care. Mm-hmm. And it's just knowing them as human beings and as a person.
Right.
And I don't get it right every time, but I do my best, and I hope they see that. So
great. All right, sir. Well, we're coming towards the end of this show. So one last thing, if you have, one last key lesson you wanted to talk about, or one more thing, if you had some advice that you wanted to give out to anybody that's out there listening, now's your chance.
Oh, well, I think you heard quite a bit from me today, and I think most soldiers who have had any luck of time to have some minutes with me already heard some of this stuff. But I tell you, Wyoming Guard, I am so thankful and so humbled to be a part of it. What a humbling experience I've had with the Wyoming Guard thus far, and a little bit of time I have left with the Wyoming Guard and in uniform. I'm humbled and thankful to be part of it. What I will tell you as a whole, Wyoming Army National Guard, it's not perfect. Neither is any enterprise or any corporation or whatever. They're never perfect. It's only as good as the people that are part of it that want to make it better. I tell you, and I'm thankful for every one of them that have been part of my life and part of my leadership, and I've been able to work with. So hang on to that. It does mean something. Stick out the good times and the bad. And I don't know of anybody who would leave here saying, "Hey, that I didn't like it or didn't enjoy my time in uniform." I just think it's a good opportunity. And then secondly, keep your family close. I mean, your family's what's going to get you through life,
right?
Not just in and out of uniform. That'd be my advice for you. So I appreciate it.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much for coming on and telling us all about the lessons you've learned. And thank you to our listeners for tuning in to another episode with some great lessons. And I sure hope you learned something. If you're interested in sharing some of your lessons, email us at the Public Affairs Office at wyogard@gmail.com or give us a call at 307-772-5040. If you like this episode or our previous episodes, tell your friends, tell your family, and of course, don't forget to subscribe on your favorite podcast app. Thanks for listening.